Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring the Tier 6 IGN Destroyer, the Hatsuharu, and this is the line that leads up to the Akizuki. As you can see, the matchmaking is, as usual for Tier 6s, extremely terrible. There's carriers, there's Tier 7, Tier 8 DDs, it's just a complete shitfest to put it quite simply. Now the reason why I'm leveling this line is because I unlocked Admiral Yamamoto, and I asked my stream viewers which ship should I put this captain on, and they all voted for the Akizuki. The problem is, of course, I don't have the Akizuki yet on the Russian server, so we're gonna have to level our way through it. You did see my previous Izakaze game. I uploaded a stream highlight of it, and I figured I could also upload a Hatsuharu game, since I don't even remember when I've last featured a Hatsuharu commentary on my channel. It's been absolutely ages. Now, I see a lot of enemy forces pushing to this cap, including the Akatsuki. So we got 2 cruisers and a DD pushing this cap, and if you look behind me, I don't really have any backup here. On the bright side though, my battleships are on the, even though they are pretty far back still on the H line, the fact that they are there will push the enemy team into going into cover. There's planes coming their way which will spot them, and there's multiple battleships behind me, so the logical choice for both the DD and the cruiser is to sail behind that island. So I use this information and I launch preemptive torps. There's no white line to tell me that they will be going that way, but basic common sense, which I just basically deduced for you guys, means that they will be sailing this way. They will be trying to get into cover behind this island, so any preemptive torps sent this way will probably have a very high chance of scoring at least a hit on one, possibly multiple targets. The Akatsuki spots them, but he's too late to dodge them, and I do kill him off. He does give advance warning to the Graf Spedo and to the Ataga, who are both able to dodge them. But I did accomplish a very important thing. I killed their only DD on this side. Well, I assume it's their only DD. One has been spotted at sea, and I would assume the last one would also be on the other side of the map. So that gives me a huge advantage, because now I have a lot of freedom. I forgot my anti-air off. The default key is P. I have it rebound to Z, because I think Z is a lot easier to reach than P. And I have that to toggle on and off second anti-air. Because when your AA opens up, you get spotted at much longer range than if you have it turned off. It is, of course, depends on what your AA range is, but on the Hatsu the AA range is 5 km, whereas your actual AA spotting range or air spotting range is something like 3.2, 3.6, whatever. The difference is still rather large. The Grafsby is reversing. He doesn't want to give broadside to the Edinburgh that's pushing him, so I sent another volley of torps his way. The Hatsuharu torps aren't really that special, you only have 6 of them, but you do have 10 kilometers of range, which is very useful. The concealment isn't bad either. This is of course with Yamamoto, so I do have the advantage of running Concealment Expert, which is not something you might necessarily have at Tier 6. It's a bit sketchy if you'll have it or not, but if you can afford to get Concealment Expert, I highly recommend getting it as soon as possible. The hit on the Grafspe, he did have repair ready, but that greatly helped my teammates. I'm gonna see if I can maybe get the kill myself. And I actually managed to secure the kill myself. That's great, of course, since we are leveling Yamamoto, which means getting a Kraken would greatly enhance our combat capabilities. And that means we'll be able to cap this, and at this point I obviously want to move towards B. And it looks like we're getting we got a pretty good early advantage. I killed their DD, I helped kill the Grafspe, and Atago is fleeing for his life. In this case, of course, you obviously want to take control. And as a DD, your priority role as a destroyer is scout for your team, cap, and third, deal damage. Those are your order of priorities. Now, if you already have the caps, then of course it's more important to scout. If you're both scouting and you have the caps, then your priority is to deal as much damage as possible. So that's kind of how you can work down the line. In this case though, I don't know why our Edinburgh is trying to chase an Atago. Atago is one of the best kiting cruisers. You just flee, burn down anything chasing you, and you laugh at them. So he's wasting a lot of time and kind of delayed this cap. I do, however, manage to cap it, and I start moving away. You notice that I have an extra speed boost. and an extra smoke. That is of course Admiral Yamamoto's first blood buff that's kicking in, giving me one additional consumable, which is of course very, very nice, since I'll have no doubt I'll get some use out of them later, because looking at the map you can see that my team has completely abandoned the C flank. This is never a good thing. You should never completely abandon a flank. If you abandon a flank, the enemy team will push through, and if you're not counter pushing, you end up kind of being enveloped. The Bismarck behind me, the one at A, is deciding to go chase the Otago into their spawn. You can see he's going up the left flank, the furthest left flank, and that's always a terrible choice. If you're uncertain of where you should position in the battleship, take a center position. In the middle of the map. You will pretty much always be useful if you're in the middle of the map. And going up left flanks, it's kind of in chess like putting the horse in a corner. You limit your options so severely, and you limit your effectiveness so severely. It's a terrible move and not something I recommend. Still though, Arkiv is apparently chasing into their spawn, not really sure why, because the priority here is of course scouting C and helping capture C. That is without a doubt the priority objective here. There's nothing interesting in the enemy base. This is something you see very often. This is a very common thing in random battles. You secure an early advantage, you secure an early lead, and then your team doesn't really know what to do with it. So they think that because pushing so far gave them the lead, clearly continuing to push will give them the win. But that's of course not correct. An early push might give you a lead, but you have to understand when you need to stop pushing. And right now people are dying. People are trying to push into their spawn and people are getting killed. The poor guys who were abandoned at sea, they didn't pull back early enough. If you get abandoned on a flank, you have to abandon it yourself as well. That's why I always recommend map awareness. That's one of the most important things. If you get abandoned on the flank, there's no point for you to push in alone against multiple people. You will not accomplish anything, you will die, and then you will be pissed at your team, because obviously they should have been reinforcing the flank, but they were idiots for leaving it. But if you went in alone after all your teammates left, then you're also an idiot. And that's really how it goes. If your team is dumb enough to leave it, don't prove them even more right by staying there. No, you just leave with them. And it's simple. You can't fight multiple people by yourself. It's too difficult. Chapayev here and North Carolina. Now the Chapayev does Chapayev have access to radar? I think stock Chapayev does have access to radar. Not entirely. No, actually no, I don't think it does. So 32k health, Chapayev should not be able to do much to us. So I'm just dropping torps and I'm playing it safe though, because there is an Ognavoy somewhere around here, and I do spot him up here. Now if I was a USDD, I would probably smoke up and start shooting him at this point, or I probably wouldn't even smoke up, I'll just start shooting him. But the Hatsuharu, sadly, like most IGN DDs, has very limited gun power. This of course changes drastically at the Akizuki, but on both the Hatsuharu and even the Shiratsuyu, even if the Shira gets a lot better at it, you struggle with firepower. So you don't really want to pick these fights at any point. What you want to do is just spot them. Spot for your team. I mentioned this is one of the most important things. Spotting for your team all the time. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm keeping this Ognavoy spotted and trying to help my team by just keeping him visible so they can blast him down. They are still pushing into the enemy spawn though. This is of course extremely stupid. I mentioned this before. This entire force that we have on the left that's pushing into the enemy spawn, they should be pushing into C. Establish map control, establish cap control. If you have cap control, you have map control. Because if you have the cap advantage, the enemy is forced to push into you, which means you control where the enemy goes. That is map control. If you can dictate what the enemy is forced to do, what the enemy has to do, that is you holding the control. And a lot of people struggle to understand this, because the second the enemy team starts dictating what you're supposed to do, that's when you have lost it. That's when you start struggling. The Ognavoy is close enough now that I'm just going to smoke up and open fire and try to support them. You can see though how terrible the guns are. The reload is, well, not quite as bad as it was on the Minikaze, but it's still a long reload and it's only 4 guns, so not exactly any DPM monster here. But hey, every little bit helps, especially against something like an Ognavoy. He has 13k health, so hitting him for 1.4k is more than 10% of his health gone with every volley. It all adds up. Bismarck, however, dodges my torpedoes. He was already turning away, which was unfortunate. Might have been running hydro, but might as well use my smoke to the full extent and get some damage in on him. What is important, if we looked at the minimap, you might have noticed that the King George was briefly visible. So I'm gonna see if I can perhaps torp him. Edinburgh keeps pushing into their base. I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. These guys are dying one by one because they keep pushing into the enemy base all the time for no real reason. And now our Edinburgh is put himself against the Bismarck Atago and this King George that's pushing up the flank. He's put himself into a crossfire in the middle of the enemy spawn. Like, that is basic lack of awareness. Now, while it would be tempting to shoot this King George, I will not do so until my torps are close enough. You can, like, shooting from a smoke is fine, but keep in mind that battleships might not realize you're there. They might not even notice or pay attention to you, but the second you start firing at them, well, they'll sure as hell notice that, and they'll start taking evasive action. He dodges incoming torps from the carrier, which is perfect for me, because then he turns in and eats my torpedoes instead. And with 4 torps, we do secure the kill quite easily. These are IGN torps after all. They might get spotted a bit earlier than most other torps, but they hit very, very hard. And that's kind of a common theme for IGN torpedoes in this game. They might be easier to spot than the other torps, but damn, you do not want to end up eating them, because they do so much damage. Now we have some serious trouble though. We have some serious trouble at this point, because we're down to 3 ships. Because my entire team, as I said, instead of pushing B and C and taking map control, they pushed into the enemy spawn. And now that they have died, well, the enemy has been pushing into our spawn, the enemy is pushing through C, and the enemy is pushing through their base. So we are surrounded. If you look at the minimap, you can see I'm pretty much in a half moon circle. I'm surrounded by everyone. So I have no option but to disengage. If I stay here and try to pick a fight, well, I'm gonna get surrounded eventually. There's a Bismarck coming from the north, a Tago coming from there, and it's just nasty. Ideally, of course, our carrier should notice this Bismarck and make a hard left and kite away from him, since I need to go there and try to save him. The Chapaev keeps sailing into the cap as expected. These torps were quite easy to predict. The reason why these torps were quite easy to predict was, of course, because he made his intention very clear. He wanted to go from C to B. If someone makes their intention clear, they want to go cap something, you can have very, very good predictive torps at them. For example, early on in this game, my predictive torps at the 2 cruisers and the DD, I knew there were battleships behind me. They were squishy ships. They needed to get into cover. So it was very easy to predict what their intention was. The same way that Chapaev, he sailed straight from C, straight towards B. He did make some course changes on the way to shoot at the Bismarck and random stuff like that, but ultimately his goal was clear. Once again, we have a very clear goal. Bismarck has spotted the carrier. The Bismarck will want to push and kill the carrier. He has a very clear goal, and this makes it very simple to predict what he wants to do. Even if he changes his course, whatever, ultimately he's still trying to get from point A to point B, and we know exactly where point B is. As long as you know exactly what the enemy's intention is, you can land extremely good torpedoes on them. Because even if they change courses and it's not perfect, because they are trying to basically cut across your line, it's pretty easy to land the shots on them. Now, for some reason, our carrier was trying to strike something down south instead of striking this Bismarck right next to him, so I have no spotting, which is quite surprising. The plane does show up, or it's possible it's proxy spotting, so now I have maybe a chance to burn this guy down. Of course, the lacking firepower really kicks in at this point. Note that I'm reversing and I'm angling my stern towards the Atago behind me. If you look at the minimap, you can see there's an Atago in the cap. So at this point, we have to be aware that he no doubt knows that we're here. He knows that we're smoked up. He's seen the smoke. He sees the incoming fire. So he's going to be torping us. And that's why we are angled the way we are, and that's why we instantly look behind us as soon as we get the warning. I even popped the speed boost as well, because it gives you much needed additional maneuverability in the smoke. In case torpedoes come exactly your way, which they do here, the speed boost helps us accelerate out of their way and barely dodge them. That's something that's very important. People think that speed boost in a smoke is wasted, but it's not, because it helps your acceleration so damn much, and it's very useful for dodging those incoming torpedoes. Now, the Atago has capped, and looking at the minimap, he was pushing my way. So I don't dare to shoot and get spotted right now. I'm going to wait until this guy's behind the island, and then I shoot. Because now the island is between me and him, and the smoke is between me and the Atago, so I should be undetected. This point though, I really want to kill him. I'm gonna get spotted by the lander, I can't help it. The thing is, I need to kill this guy before he kills our carrier. Because, well, our carrier is not defending himself. A lot of stuff coming in from behind. That lander is so low health, I could actually maybe gun him down. So instead I decide to drop torps towards the Budyonni, and in case the lander tries to turn in. Basically I want to discourage them from chasing me too heavily, and that's the purpose of those torpedoes. I do have to stop firing though, because the Bismarck is so far away and I'm being crossfired. When you're crossfired like this, it's very hard to dodge the torps. Note that I repaired the fire. I made sure to repair the fire only after my firing debuff had disappeared. Because if you repair the fire and you still have a firing debuff, you'll still be spotted, and then they'll just set you on fire again, and at that point you're going to be completely screwed. Now, my torps are not going to hit the Budyonni, nose-in torps, rarely going to hit. Ideally, of course, I want to kill off the Bismarck. This is priority number one. Deal with the Bismarck. It's very low health, it doesn't take many hits, and I can potentially use the new smoke mechanic against him. The new smoke mechanic means that you are going to be spotted regardless of if you're in a smoke or on the other side of a smoke, based on your gun caliber. And if I smoke up right now, if the Bismarck shoots and I smoke up, I'll be able to spot him because of the new mechanic. Now I wanted to turn in and torp this Atago, maybe try to get rid of him since he's trying to cut across and ambush me. So I turned on my AA and tried to shoot down this plane, because sadly the plane happened to pop up just as I tried to make this ambush. As soon as the plane has passed, I turned on my AA and I get undetected again. Hatsu AA is of course not strong enough to shoot down the plane though. I was hoping it would crit it down, but tier 8 plane against tier 6 is hard. Now though, I really want to kill this Bismarck. Preemptive torps on the Atago in case he pushes around that island, but it looks like the Atago is playing super safe and launched torps and went the other way, which is quite unfortunate for us. Now though, we want to kill the Bismarck. I'm going to use the new smoke mechanic against him, and that is okay. We get spotted, the Atago is chasing us. We need to make sure the Bismarck shoots. Secondary is opening. And that was his main gun battery. Now we can slow down. He has shot, which means even though I'm smoked up and there's no one else spotting, because of the way the new smoke mechanic works, I am in fact spotting him. And he is not able to spot me because my smoke bloom range is only 2.5, because my gun caliber is so very small. So I got 20 seconds now since he last fired to kill him off. And he does fade out of vision, but my volley was already in the air, and I do manage to kill him, and I get the Yamamoto fireworks because of the Kraken. Now though the Atago is pushing in, based on his torps, I'll launch preemptive torpedoes based on which way he's coming. However, I get spotted, and because how early I got spotted, it was before my smoke bloom range. I got spotted at 3 kilometers, which means of course that this Atago was running probably the dumbest possible build you can imagine, which is he was running the spotting module instead of the concealment module. Now I doubt I need to explain to all of you why running the spotting module on an Atago is terrible. It's one of the few cruisers it's one of the stealthiest cruisers, and one of the greatest strengths on that cruiser is running concealment. And this guy of course doesn't really know how to build it, so he's running the spotting, and that allowed him to see me in the smoke at 3 kilometers instead of the usual 2, or well 2.5, because I had fired recently, so I might still be under that effect. But ultimately got killed by someone running pretty much, I will straight up call it a stupid build. Now some of you might try to quote the argument, but Flamu, if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid. No. If you run a terrible build and you happen to get lucky because you get a situation that happens to favor that build, it doesn't mean the build is good. It's still a terrible build. It's kind of like secondary Kurfürst. You might get that one Typhoon, or whatever they're called. You might get that one Typhoon in 100 and get 300k damage with your secondary spec Kurfürst. That doesn't mean the secondary Kurfürst is the optimal build or a good spec at high tier. It's fun, sure, it can work out, but it's still not in any way a good build. The game ends. Kraken too devastating. Sadly though, because of that very surprising build by the Atago, I got caught off guard and I got killed. I don't know even if he hadn't been running the build, if it would have been enough. Ideally, I think I might have landed the torps before he could turn his guns to aim, because Atago turret traverse is very sluggish. My predictive torps looked pretty good before I died. But if have maybe is not an excuse, the game was ultimately lost. Confederate Kraken, high caliber first blood, so a lot of damage done this game, to put it simply. Looking at the team score, it's of course quite a depressing story. I mean, I was the tier 6 in tier 8 matchmaking, and my team, well, they kind of shut the bed. I'm sorry, but there's not really any other way to say it. We had very good map control, we had a great advantage, and then my team did the classic thing that teams tend to do when they get an advantage. They overextend, they push into the enemy base, and they throw away that entire advantage at once. And from then on, they just collapsed one by one. Detailed report. Well, the majority of the damage is, of course, not surprisingly from the torpedoes, but the guns did do 13,337, calculated, very calculated, 13k damage plus another 11k in fires on the Bismarck, so the guns, at this point the guns already start becoming a pretty decent supplement to your damage. The higher tier you get in IGN DDs, the more relevant they become, and at the Hatsuharu, when you start having these 10k torps, you start getting into the whole IGN DD groove, and this is usually around the time when you start figuring out if you like this line or not, because at tier 6 and onwards the game gets very, very different because of all the carriers with manual drops and all the radars, all the hydro, and the game just changes, and this can be a bit of a surprising to many people. Like, they had a great time in the tier 4 and tier 5, and then at tier 6 suddenly the game got very, very challenging. Anyway, let me show you my recommended build for this ship. Right, as usual, we'll start off with the modules. Now the first thing you obviously want to get is the upgraded torpedoes. The default torps have a pretty terrible range of 6 kilometers, so if you're on the way to level to the Hatsuharu, start saving up free XP now, because you'll want to be free XPing the hull and getting these torps as quickly as possible. Because the night and day difference, like, you go from 6 km torps that deal 15k to 10 km torps that deal 16k. It's just a massive advantage, and honestly you should get it as soon as possible. I don't know why they made the default torp 6 km, because if you do not have a 10-point captain by this point, your concealment will be worse than your torpedo range, which means you will struggle to stealth torp. I dislike making the stock version as bad as they have made it, and the Hatsu stock torpedoes really are terrible, and that's not something I like at all. Once you have that though, get the range upgrade, follow it up with premium smoke, premium repair, and just engine boost. Premium if you can afford, but honestly at this point, if you're a new player especially, you might be pretty starved for money. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod, you want your turret and gun survivability, better dispersion on your guns, and more importantly faster torpedo tubes traverse speed. And engine survivability, although if you do have a speed boost module, that is really, really useful, but most of the time this is the safest and best bet, because if your engine gets knocked out, you will struggle to slow down in time or accelerate in time. It affects both of them. Especially the slowing down is important, because if you try to slow down into a smoke, if you try to smoke up and slow down and someone breaks your engine, you will glide out of your own smoke. Of course, you won't do that if you have last stand, which I also recommend. And finally, faster acceleration, because maneuverability is so damn good. Captain perks, priority number 1 is absolutely preventive maintenance, followed by last stand, followed by survivability expert. You want more health, you want to be able to survive. The longer you stay alive, the more useful you'll be for the team. And concealment expert. Once you have these, build into adrenaline rush. If you lose half your health, you've already gained torpedo armament. Plus, of course, you're getting the gun power as well. So get Adrenaline Rush first, is one of the best perks in the game, and then after that get Torpedo Armament. And after this, I would probably go for, RPF is one of my favorite perks. I love having this build plus RPF is pretty much my Shimakaze build. I love it. It's so good on torpedo boats because you can launch so many predictive torps. But I don't think that's very relevant at tier 6. I doubt any of you is going to put a 19-point captain on a Hatsuharu because it's not that special of a ship. Flag-wise, speed and detonation. That's pretty much the bread and butter. The rest can go into XP, money making, whatever. I run the additional flooding chance, but it's pretty damn small. And I do run the faster cooldown, but this is mostly because I have a shit ton of these flags, so I might as well use them. The rest is all just XP and money because, well, I'm leveling it since I do want to get my Yamamoto on the Akizuki as soon as possible. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary. I will talk to you guys later.